You're about to enter a new dimension where boundaries of life sciences, data, and technology blur, and AI reshapes what's possible. Welcome to the Improzone, powered by Improzo.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for stepping into the Improzone. We are doing a mini series, and this is part 3 of 4. So hopefully you've listened to part 1 and 2. If you haven't, you can go back. Part 1 is really about just stepping into the AI space and kind of the considerations and security that's needed as you get kind of your baby steps going. Part 2, we just talked about the idea of using AI to build some things and how you can actually make real use of AI, but the risks that come with starting to build. Here in episode 3, we're going to talk a little bit about a potentially parallel, but also a little more complex thing to be doing, which is buying third party tools that have AI kind of embedded in them, or AI is a core component of what they do. And kind of the complexity that comes with a third party tool where you're one more layer away from what's really happening inside of the potential black box that comes along with a purchased tool. So I have again with me Nathan Trueblood to help us unpack this idea of these third party tools. And you don't have to do everything yourself, so this isn't mean bad that you're going to go down this path. It's actually probably really critical that some of these things you just buy them. But how do you kind of make sense of that black box, as it were? So Nathan, what's different about when you're using something that's more third party as a tool compared to, say, a ChatGPT or something that you're building on your own?
Great question. I think this is a conversation I'm having a lot with customers these days, which is, often a way to get benefit from all the innovation in AI is to consume a third-party tool that's solving a specific problem. That could be a customer support bot. It could be something that helps you write marketing content. There's it's kind of, we're seeing kind of an infinite number of different really fascinating tools that are coming out. It could just be a feature in some of your existing tools that now is making that tool more powerful in some way. But when it's coming from someone else, you have a lot less visibility into where the risks are. And so you can't really see, I mean, maybe they'll tell you which models are being used, but to the extent that a vendor or, really your partner tells you all of this, um, they can explain it to you, but you don't really have any way to validate it. And so I like to joke. So the state of the art right now, it seems, is if you're considering a third party tool, you ask that vendor to fill out some kind of AI questionnaire. And essentially it's a black box. So please give us reassurance contractually
Right.
that you've done the right thing. But if something bad happens, the contract isn't really going to be able to do much if you've already damaged your reputation in some way. But that
Right.
seems to be the state of the art, which is, companies say, fill out this survey, fill out this questionnaire. Vendors say, trust us, we've done all of the work. But there isn't a lot. People need to do more to really assess where the risk is. And that's where
Yeah.
AI, we keep getting brought in to help companies start to assess. But that's the risk. You can't see it. You don't know what guardrails they have in place. And it sort of comes down to, well, let's just agree contractually to do the right thing. But that's not
Right.
enough.
Well, and I think it's akin to, the legal components that you have in terms of liability and risk sharing. But to your point, even if you have all that in place and there's penalties and all that, if it's a reputational damage risk, it's really hard to quantify that. And it's also kind of, you can't, put the toothpaste back into the tube. It's the reputation's been damaged. So that's the challenge of this kind of thing. And I do think there are very real examples out there of companies, kind of making a misstep when it comes to using third party AI. So, what do you do other than obviously this trust thing? I'm assuming you're going to offer up maybe some ideas of more than just trusting your vendor partner, that can help you know if it's actually a safe tool to use.
That's right. And I think the metaphor I would use here is, in the security world, and we're here really talking about AI security and safety. It really extends just beyond security to other concerns about accuracy and things we've been talking about in earlier episodes. But what can a company do? So the metaphor I would make here is it's a lot when you think about it from a security perspective. A vendor might have some tool that you're going to bring into your environment. Um, but you're concerned about security. Does this new tool we're bringing in expose us to additional security risk? Could some kind of bad actor get access to our environment through this tooling? So in the early days, it was just contractual. Please assure us that you've done your homework when it comes to security. But that's not enough if you're highly regulated or you deal with sensitive data. So now the idea of pen testing, penetration testing. Please give us a report, or we're going to actually, before we onboard you, we're going to do a penetration test against your tool because we trust you, but the risk is so high, we really need to actually validate and understand where that risk is. So this is something we do frequently at Encrypt AI, which is help a company to assess the risk in a third-party tool. And when I say risk, I want to explain that a little bit, which is it's not just security risk. It might be, well, this tool is specific for customer service. So what are the risks relative to customer service? Can this thing be tricked into saying something that is toxic or not safe or inappropriate? That's one example. Or if it's a marketing tool, like what is its propensity for hallucination? What are these, sort of propensities? So you kind of want to understand relative to your business and the specific use case for that tool, what are the risks? And so that's what we do. We help our customers essentially do that penetration test, and we call it red teaming. It's the same term from the security world, which is let's red team this tool to understand where the risks are, so that you can then put in appropriate either guardrails or just guidance to employees about how the tool should or shouldn't be used.
And do you think that this is something that you would need to do? Like, how, I guess maybe like the threshold for what do you red team and what do you kind of not feel like it hits that threshold? Like, what's your criteria for when it's needed and when it's not needed?
That's a great question. I mean, I think anything that is customer facing, you absolutely need it.
Yeah.
But as we were discussing in the previous episode around just like even internal use of AI, consumption of AI, using those tools and not assessing the risk there could ultimately lead to sharing something to a customer, preparing a board
Right.
presentation that has factually inaccurate information, whatever it is. So I kind of think that the risks are new in AI, and you kind of need to assess every one of these things so you know what you're getting into. It doesn't have to be onerous. I think,
Right.
again, people are
That's helpful.
embracing this, they're doing this with contracts, but I think everyone knows it's not sufficient. And so, what we're seeing is coming is a lot more automation to really assess the risk. And then it's not about getting the vendor in trouble. It's then like, okay, let's work together as partners here to make sure that we can fully embrace this tool the way it's designed, but we're not exposing ourselves to security, safety, or compliance risk.
But it's actually not so dissimilar from what we were talking about way back in episode one, where you're trying to get people to be thinking about the potential risk of just unleashing an AI tool to your employee base to use for their own individual projects. You put a policy in place. You say, I trust you, don't do that. But you may also want to check to see if they're doing those things or not. It's kind of it's a similar parallel, right? To saying,
And it can also get very specific. That's right. It also can get very specific to your business. Let me share an example from one of our customers recently who is in the finance industry, and they had purchased an amazing customer service bot, AI powered, and that vendor does a good job. They, put in appropriate guardrails in their product. They went through review with the finance customer. It was all good.
yeah,
Um, but then this same finance customer but they didn't do any red teaming. It was more of it's all good. You filled out the survey and we agreed, and we poked at your tool and it seems pretty good. Um, but then they brought us in and said, can you assess this tool? We're pretty sure we're fine, but can you take a look? And then we did red teaming against the tool, and we found a lot of risk that was
uh-oh.
specific to that particular finance company and specific to that use case. And as a result of that, then the vendor worked together with the finance company to make sure that those risks were addressed, either additional guardrails in the tool itself or integrating with guardrails that the finance company wants to roll out themselves. So that's a really real world example, I think, of what's happening right now, which is like, hey, we're embracing AI, we're embracing this tool. It's really powerful. We've been assured contractually it's all good, but now kind of using the security metaphor, but we're in such, our business is so important to us. We need to do some additional investigation here. And the good news is Encrypt AI makes that really easy and automated. But that's what's coming, is not
Yeah.
just shaking hands, it's also reviewing the analysis together.
What I like about what you said there too, though, Nathan, is that it's not just because I think the pushback could be, well, but that's so unlikely. Like, what are the odds that someone would come up with this super creative way to kind of hack into my tool? But what you're saying is you're actually looking for things that are related to the use of the tool. So this isn't far-fetched. This isn't unlikely. This is something that actually is a very real scenario that resulted in, an unsafe answer or inappropriate or inaccurate or whatever the problem was. But it's not, it's also like kind of conditioning it to the things that are actually intended for it to be done so that it isn't, kind of a waste. Like you're not boiling the ocean of possible risk. You're focusing on the risks that matter. I love that idea
Yeah,
too, because I think that's a pushback, right?
that's a really insightful observation, because the tools that people are consuming might be for a specific problem, but they're not necessarily specific to your business, your regulation, your brand, your
Right.
industry, right? And so they may have guardrails that are there from a security and safety perspective, but then you may want to assess, think of some kind of customer service tooling that you're going to deploy. You know, uh, does it react in a way that's consistent with your brand message? It would be one example. Or is it happy to tell you how to migrate off of the company that you're serving? So
Right.
these are not security concerns, but these are definitely use case and business context concerns, right? If it's a finance customer service bot, that's great. It shouldn't respond if you ask it how to cook up a recipe for meth. I mean, but we've seen time and time again these things where those kinds of risks weren't evaluated,
Right.
and then you end up with someone who has egg on their face because someone was able to trick a conversational experience into doing something it's not supposed to.
Right. I think that's the interesting part is that part of this is, good news. Most people are not thinking of ways to thwart to thwart these tools. However, it's really important from a reputation space, or even something as subtle as I know there are companies that certainly go around showing all their clients, right? They have those logo slides with all the logos of all the companies they work with. And there are other companies who don't really talk about which companies, or they are under an NDA and they're not allowed to talk about what companies they support because of just the nature of what they do. And your tool needs to understand that subtle nuance in terms of how it answers questions, how it engages. Because if it's not, we don't talk about the other clients we have, for example, versus we love to share all the great clients we have. That's a pretty big difference in terms of how you'd want your bot or your agent or your tool to behave.
That's right.
And it's not probably something that there's not universal, right? There's different approaches. So it's really important that as you design it, you're thinking about the ways it might be used or the way your brand ethos tends to show up, right? There's some brands that are kind of snarky and they might be sarcastic and they might make fun of something, and other
And that
brands,
might be okay. And
right? And
others.
that'd be okay. But others like, no, that's not the vibe at all. Like we're
And
not
this is
going to do
where
that.
like the whole AI stuff gets really interesting because you know uh, you can imagine then when you're assessing a tool, you're going to want to assess it from the perspective of what's appropriate for our business. It's not just a security concern. Like if you're doing
Yeah.
penetration testing, like what are all the ways that we could possibly penetrate this particular tool or whatever, get access to it. But now when we're talking about AI, it's not just a security concern. It's actually, we have a bunch of other things that we're concerned about that are specific to our business. So if you're going to red team or assess risk in a tool, you're assessing it, yes, from a security perspective, but also you're assessing it for our business, our context, our brand. We need to make sure we've assessed, does this thing have a propensity to give the wrong answer in one way or another? And
Right.
again,
And
you need
wrong
to
is a
understand what the risk
subjective
is.
thing now. Wrong isn't like 2 plus 2 is 5. This is
It's
wrong
subjective.
is just tone or, so I think that's the core question, right? If you're going to buy one of these things, which I think everyone has considered it or has even already done it in some cases, how do you decide? Like what would be your first set of maybe, top level questions and advice you'd give to someone who's like, I think I need to go buy an AI tool to solve my problem today?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think there's a lot of really great tools that are coming out and features that are coming out every day. I think, and I see this in the AI questionnaires. There's already lots of good questions that are in there about sort of asking about a company about its governance policies, what do they do to assess risk, and so forth. So I think That's a good step, but I think validation against your own policies is really the difference maker, and that's this little story I told, which is, okay, so you're going to bring in a tool, at least assess the risk according to your business.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to be hard. It's simply like, here are the regulations we're subject to, here are the concerns we have in terms of brand, here are our sort of rules of the road. At Encrypt AI, we can then operationalize that into a set of rules we can use to drive a test. And so then every time there's maybe it's once a year, or every time there's a new version of that tool, let's just rerun the assessment so we're all clear it's good. And if we find a new issue, then let's tune up our guardrails, or ask the vendor to tune up the guardrails to make sure that's not going to be an issue in the future. So yeah, I mean, it's trust, but verify every time, because the risks are moving fast. The different ways that you could get into trouble are showing up, new every day. So you need to kind of make sure you're constantly revalidating.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I do think that what you just hit on too is it doesn't have to be this huge lift. You probably have a lot of this stuff in your, either it's a policy that's externally available that we can just
That's right.
grab, or it's something you've already written in terms of your guardrails for your brand or your handbook or whatever it is. So
That's right.
making sure people understand this isn't about making a whole nother framework to evaluate. It's actually taking
It's
what
what
you
you
have.
already have.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing with our customers and reminding them every day, which is, yes, AI is new, but you already have the policies because you already give them to your employees. Like, you already have written
Right.
this down at Encrypt AI. We can take those documents and translate them in seconds into tests where you can then validate that this tool, this feature, are going to stay consistent with your policy. That's right.
Yeah, and it gets back to some of the same themes we've been talking about, which is that you have to kind of think of even these tools as sort of overeager interns that are going to need a
That's
lot
right.
of guidance to to get it right. So, I think overall, kind of to put a bow on this conversation, to me, it seems pretty clear that everyone's going to have some degree of purchase of AI tools because you don't really want to create
No
all of
question.
the different things yourself. So that's a reality we're going to have to contend with, and it's important that we make the most of these opportunities to be more efficient, effective, hopefully faster, cheaper, better, all those things. But it's not an automatic that the tool, just because it's built by a reputable company that you've heard of, or what, or a company that the person really well personally, whatever whatever the reasoning is from a trusting perspective, you still need to do the legwork to verify that you're not going to get yourself into a world of challenges and hurt for your reputation, for
That's right.
spend, whatever. Because those guardrails, even the vendors that are really good at this, they still, sounds like in your example, it definitely would have not been something you would have thought could have gone sideways, and it still had some risk that was very specific to how it was going to be used. So I
That's
think
right.
this is an important, plug to say, like, this is even if it's a third party that's an expert, you still have to do the diligence and not just trust them without some verification. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of this kind of tech right now. So
And I think
any
that
other last
I
words?
would add
Yeah.
to that, the last thing I would add to that, I think, as we wrap this one up, is you need to choose a specialist who really knows how to help you assess the risk. Because the vendor that's providing you the tool, yes, they built AI into their tool, but they're really a specialist on what that tool is supposed to do.
Right.
But they're not a specialist in necessarily in all the ways that there is risk from an AI perspective. And so this is where we come in, which is, you need someone, especially with how fast AI is moving, who's a specialist in helping you assess the risk in what you're building or consuming.
Yeah, and I can't agree more on that. And the idea that if you have domain specific things like in pharma and healthcare, kind of where Prozo plays, same, I would say the same plug,
You
right?
need a
That
specialist. That's right.
you need people who know that what's uniquely a challenge in this space that maybe in another industry vertical would be a non-issue is a very big deal in a pharmaceutical company that has, is making ethical products and has just the different kind of risk profiles. So I think it's so important that people consider all of that. You want a security expert, you want a domain expert, you want a tool expert, and
You
you got
want
to
an
bring them
AI
all together.
expert. That's right.
Yeah, you
Yeah. I
need
mean,
that.
this is why security and pen testing companies exist, because it's all they do, because the
Right.
risk is so high, you can't screw it up. And that's why, at Encrypt AI, that's all we do, is help
It
you
makes
assess
total
and
sense.
manage AI related risk.
And I think the nice thing about this journey is that you are going to have chances to keep iterating, keep growing with AI with partners that can keep you safe. So it's
Right.
don't be scared. We can still do all this and build all these things. So
That's right. Just
awesome. Well,
bring the right safety equipment. That's right.
exactly. It's just like our motorcycle thing.
Exactly.
I think, I'll wrap this one up by just saying again, thank you for digging into this topic. If you haven't, go ahead and go back and listen to 1 and 2, and stay tuned. If you're still interested, we'll be doing a 4th episode, which is going to talk about that external, which we touched on a little bit here, but like that idea of really putting your AI out there in a public forum. And so stay tuned for that, because I think that is the next kind of evolution of where we're headed with AI. So thank you again for stepping into the Improzone.
This has been the Improzone, improving life, empowering customers. Follow us and stay tuned for what's next.